Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. It's that time of the year. Bases Loaded is back in action. I'm Blake Munroe. I'm joined by Jeff Howe and CJ Vogel. As always, thanks for joining us. And yeah, guys, baseball season, a week from today, it'll start here. And I'm actually going to put the schedule up because they play UC Davis in 7 days, guys, and high hopes for this season. Before we really get into it, let me get y'all's initial thoughts.
Oh, how can you not be excited about this team, right? And the one thing, obviously, going into year 2 with Schloss is getting, more of his guys more acclimated, right? We hear it from him pretty often, getting, the SEC level of talent to play in this conference, each weekend. We obviously saw that last year towards the back end. Your arms just basically ran out of options. Obviously, injuries didn't help, but now going into year 2, it didn't necessarily be classified as boastful, but when you hear Schloss talk about his arms the way that he did, and Jeff, we both talked about this afterward, that's a huge positive, right? To hear your manager come out and say that we have a lot of depth with our arms. That's very reassuring to me. So look, very excited for that. I think the strength ultimately will be on the hill, and that playing at Dish is going to be something that I can't wait to start watching week in and week out.
Opening day at the Dish, like it should be. Like, I get why you play the deal at Globe Life. You need it for RPI purposes, but I love the fact that you open at the Dish. To your point, CJ, and we'll talk about pitching depth. Whenever Schloss says something positive or goes out of his way to point out something he likes, I've learned to take that to the bank, because he'll be honest with you. Like, if he's uncertain about something, he'll say it. If he feels like something needs work, he'll talk about it. But if he feels really good about something, he'll mention it. He's talked about pitching depth. So I'm really excited to see a lot of these arms, and especially early on, that's where you're going to see a lot of these young arms. You want to get these guys some live reps because, let's face it, you don't have very many weekends. You've got the UC Davis series. You've got one against Michigan State. You've got the tournament down in Houston where you'll play Coastal, Baylor, and Ohio State. And then you've got one more weekend with USC Upstate before, boom, Ole Miss is here March 13th. So you've got a month to kind of get right before that SEC schedule starts. So it's here. I'm excited for it. But, man, the SEC play is going to be here before we know it.
That's right, guys. And they were picked number 2 in the SEC preseason poll there. Looking at some of the other polls, overall in all of baseball, number 3 as ranked by D1 Baseball and USA Today, and then number 8 by Baseball America, and number 8 by Perfect Game. So my question to y'all, last year they started around 15-ish, and we thought that was pretty fair. So what would you say is more fair with this one, 3 or 8?
Ooh, Jeff, you have any
I'll split the difference. I'll split the difference and say, probably right around 5-6 is probably where I would have Texas. I think when you look at the SEC pecking order, look, man, LSU's the top dog. So until proven otherwise, they were the last team standing in Omaha. So, hey, respect to Jay Johnson and his club. But, this team, one thing that we talked about last year that really hurt the team late was, especially when the Jared Spencer injury happened, it felt like you were just really kind of hanging on. And then, it was Luke Harrison's, his first real big workload season after Tommy John. This felt like in a lot of ways the pitching staff last year just ran out of gas by the time you got to the postseason. Your schedule was maybe a little more favorable last year than it is this year. So this could be a better team and not win the SEC or finish, maybe a little further down in the conference standings. But yeah, hey, if you're the fourth or fifth best team in the SEC, that means you still probably got a pretty good shot at getting the top 8.
Yeah, I was going to lean that way as well. I guess more so towards that 3 spot than 8, because look, you have to again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the arms on the hill, that's where I'm leaning. And 7 of your top 8 pitchers from a year ago in terms of appearances and innings pitched return again. So you're going to have plenty of experience, guys who have gone on the road to play at Arkansas, to play, a lot of these top-end matchups at home, like we saw against Georgia, Texas A&M, and time again. Now you get to do that against, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, South Carolina, all on the road this year. That's something that I think certainly plays into the strength of this team. But ultimately, adding a Carson Tenney and an Aiden Robbins, sign me up for what you returned as well in the lineup.
And I think I lean more with you, CJ, on that. I'm a little bit closer to 3. I think you can make an argument almost for anywhere in the top 5. I've said this on Coffee and Football. I think any of that's pretty fair. 1 might be a little bit of a stretch there. But, 2 through 5, I have no problem. I think 8 might be a little low just based on things that we've heard. But, I mean, it's kind of hard to complain when you're in the top 10 period. And there's obviously a lot of baseball left to be played. But yeah, as long as they can stay healthy, I think this is a top 5 team in all of baseball. No doubt about it. All right. Well, let's, speaking of that top 5 team, let's just jump right into it, guys. And, we talked about pitching obviously being the strength, and there are no shortage of arms. We know there's a few proven commodities in a couple of guys, but what's y'all's overall thoughts on the pitching?
Well, you have to start with Dylan Volantis, right? You have to. He's one of the best freshmen we've seen in recent memory at Texas, throwing from the left side. 12 saves a year ago? I think we all believe the expectation is that he's going to become either a Friday or Saturday guy, right? And we'll wait for the season ultimately to see what he ends up doing. But when you're headlined by a guy like Volantis, and you obviously return the arms that you do, Harrison's coming back. I mean, that to me is a lot of what the strength was a year ago, is you get through Friday and Saturday and you kind of piece together what you hope to be a quality Sunday outing in 2025. But going into this year, the top end guys that you are starting on the hill, I think it's fantastic, Jeff.
Yeah, no, the main guy for me is Jason Flores. He's going to be the guy that I want to see early in the year. Where does he start? Is he, in the weekend rotation? Is he a midweek guy? And if he can be a guy that by the time you get to SEC play, you feel like he can take one of those spots, even if it's a Sunday spot, the ability to have flexibility. And it's a shame, like we started to see early on last year how they wanted to use Ruger Riojas, but they tried Cade Bing in that Sunday role. It didn't work, and they eventually settled with Ruger on Sunday. And then when Spencer got injured, you needed to keep Ruger in that rotation. But I think they probably want to use him, not have so much of a defined role for him, as just be a guy that, hey, if somebody's having a bad outing, yeah, you can put him in and bring him in the 3rd inning and have him stretch a little bit. Or you need somebody to, you got runners on base in a 1-run game in the 7th inning. Hey, bring him in there and see if he can get you out of the jam. So I just want them to have a little more flexibility with him. So Flores is the guy for me. But I think what I'm most excited about, honestly, even with Volantis leaving the bullpen and going to the weekend rotation, I mean, you bring in Hayden LeFew and Cal Higgins out of the portal. We've talked a lot about the young guys on the channel with Cozart and Crossland. Thomas Burns, I don't think gets enough credit for the job he did last year. I think that kind of got lost in the sauce. That's a hard throwing, SEC style power arm coming out of your bullpen. Max Grubs just finds a way to get guys out, with that sinker ball, just getting it working, pitching to contact, letting the defense work behind him. So I think between experience and the young talent you've got, I think you can have a really, really good bullpen this year.
And going back to that alumni game, we saw the younger guys, a couple of them early. Yeah. Obviously very limited scope of viewing there, and it's a little more comfortable than an actual game. But what were y'all's initial thoughts on those two from what you saw?
Well, I guess sticking with that group of guys in the bullpen, right? We got to see more of Grubs. Obviously, Crossland is a guy that we've heard a lot of that is making waves. But seeing Burns continue to have the top end velocity, Jeff, and Blake, that's something to me that, look, I don't know if Texas necessarily had a ton of that a year ago, nor did it necessarily matter, but you're getting guys out. But anytime you have a guy coming in that you can get 99 to 100 with, hey, sign me up for some of that. So that was encouraging. I think the big thing for me, again, is the focus on getting early strikes. And of course, it was a cold day, so you can kind of pin the low scoring output on that. But 2-1, not many walks, not many three ball counts. That's something that I was very encouraged by. I know wild pitches were an issue a year ago. Texas gave a lot of free bases and losses towards the back end as well. But just seeing the continued attack on the zone, you got to like that. I will say this. I was again, very blown away by Crossland. That slider, that late breaking 85, mid 80s. Sign me up for a guy that's that young, looking that well, or that polished on the hill already.
Yeah, they really extended Sam Cozart in the alumni game more than I probably thought they would. I mean, he was upwards around 70 pitches, but I think it was his last batter he faced was Carson Tenney, and just froze him. They had a hit and run on and just froze him on a breaking ball. And look, man, Carson Tenney's one of the best hitters in America. If you can fool him on a breaking ball and make him look really out of his element, you can probably do it to anybody. So I think that's another thing, Blake, with the young guys. CJ talked about Crossland, we talked about Cozart. Man, the demeanor that some of these guys have. Yeah. I mean, there's some, especially pitching at this place, when you start walking through the halls in the clubhouse and you start seeing the arms that have come through this place, man, it can really get inside some guys' heads. So I think that was the one thing about Volantis' year that really helped him, is it just seemed like nothing really fazed him. And it seems like, at least early on, it's a small sample, but Crossland and Cozart specifically seem like two guys that doesn't really seem so far like a whole lot bothers them. That's a really, really good sign for both those guys.
Yeah. And man, I was blown away. I mean, they look like two grown men out there. No doubt about it. Just big physical guys as well. So two other guys that I want to mention that a lot of people haven't been talking about, but I've been told to keep some eyes on, are Michael Winter and Jack McKernan. So make note of those two players.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, Blake, when we talk about those pitchers, I think everybody needs to keep this in mind. This group of freshmen, this is really like the first full cycle where Schloss and Max Wiener really got to go to work and put together a recruiting class. It wasn't kind of, hey, let's take some parts from here and see what we can salvage. Like, no, this is like the first time they really got to recruit two Texas there, guys. So this is really going to be our first glimpse of, all right, what kind of pitching profile does this staff really value in terms of their high school recruits?
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, let's look at catcher next. We talked about Tenney a little bit, his batting, but sounds like he's going to have the starting spot pretty much lined up there. I don't think there's any surprise by any of us or anybody watching. But, what are your thoughts on Tenney? And based on what we saw last week, what do you think about the catching position?
You bring in a guy that was a top 3 finalist for the Buster Posey Award a year ago. Yeah, I think it's safe to say he's going to be your starting backstop. I actually thought it was pretty interesting hearing Dylan Volantis talk about him, because he's 6'4", 235, 240. He's a big target. That was something that I thought was pretty interesting. He said, I love throwing to him because I know that when he throws his mid up, I have a big target. And that's, I think maybe an underrated aspect of it. But look, anytime you can add a bat like that at a premium position like catcher, it's going to be invaluable throughout the duration of a season. We've seen that already during his time at Notre Dame. Now continuing to have a plus hitter in the lineup at the catcher spot for Texas, as we saw last year with Rylan Galvan, is just so important.
Yeah, I'll say this with Tenney, and I can say the same thing about Aiden Robbins. Even the best guys that have come to Texas out of the portal, Mike Antico, Skylar Messenger, even Porter Brown kind of reviving his career after he was slumping at TCU. Even the best hitters we've seen, sometimes they tend to start slow. And I think, again, there's a lot of just mental stuff that goes into playing in this park, playing in this program. But I think Tenney and Robbins are both good enough that they'll figure it out at some point. Like, Carson Tenney's bat is going to play in the SEC, and it's going to play in this park. I have no question about that. My thing is, how much do you put on him from a leadership standpoint? Because, CJ, I was there for the same availability you were when Volantis talked about how much he likes Tenney catching him. But, man, from in just kind of an emotional leadership heartbeat standpoint, Rylan Galvan was so important to what this team did last year. And you had Kimball Schuessler. Like, you had some experience on that infield. That's now going to fall on Tenney. It's going to fall on Ethan Mendoza. Are those guys ready to step up and accept that challenge of being in those leadership roles?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I asked someone, what can Texas fans expect from Tenney? And the answer, I had to kind of, I guess, make it a little more family friendly, but you can expect him to knock the snot out of the baseball nonstop. So looking forward to him getting up there.
And when we first met with him, Blake, in the fall, somebody asked him, hey, because Dish Falk's traditionally not a hitter's park. He said, are you nervous about hitting here? What do you think about it? He's like, man, I'm just here to hit bombs. And I'm like, yes, sir, you are. So I'm looking forward to watching Carson Tenney.
Let's look at the rest of the infield. I mean, I know a lot of people are penciling in people from all over. I don't really think that's the case just yet. But one guy that does seem to have his position locked in is Ethan Mendoza at second base. We know what we get with him, but I'm curious. He put on a few pounds on purpose, obviously, but curious what y'all think about that.
Well, it's going to be interesting where they go, right? And Blake, Jeff, I'll leave y'all for what kind of combinations we could see here, but you have a lot of pieces. How do they fit? Is it unique? I mean, obviously with Casey Borba, you've seen time at first and third. Josh Livingston coming over. I mean, first and third, again, another option there. But again, when does A-Rod become a guy that you can fully depend on at shortstop is the big question for me. Otherwise, look, Ethan Mendoza, we know is a very solid piece at second base. He's going to be one of your leaders. He's going to be a guy that you can count on at the top of your lineup. We saw that. And Jeff, I think we even joked about it. Leaving that availability is looking back a year ago, there were questions on where this group would really fall in the lineup. Well, with Mendoza, he's going to be at the top of your lineup playing second base every day. That's solidified. Now, in terms of what else happens, we'll have to wait and see. All I know is when you add a guy like Timo Becerra into the mix as well, you have options. How the staff sees fit, that's TBD in my eyes.
And CJ, that's honestly something they didn't have last year. Even they went through those periods where, Doza was hurt and A-Rod got hurt. You just kind of had to shuffle what you had and cobble it together to make it work. But between, Becerra can play pretty much anywhere, second, short, or third. So you've got a veteran backup that can play multiple positions. On the corners, Borba could play first and third. Livingston could play first and third. Cal Early's a guy that could play third. So I just like the fact that you've got some options now. It's not, hey, we kind of got to sink or swim with whatever we had. Because, the thing about last year's team too, like we didn't know how the Kimball Schuessler thing at first base was going to work. It ended up working out really well, but I think now you've at least got some options to where if somebody's scuffling or maybe you just don't like the fit, you can change it up because you do have some bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it with that combo: Livingston, Borba, and then Timo as well. Being now in what order they fall. Then of course you got A-Rod at shortstop. Most likely anyway. I mean, to be determined as far as how they work with that, but it's going to be those combo of guys, and it's a good depth. Like you said, Jeff, those guys can go anywhere that they want to be. So I feel a lot more confident going into this season than compared to last season.
It's interesting too, how much better I think Schloss feels about the depth on this team, and just us looking at it from what the eye test tells us, we feel better about it. It's weird saying that in a year where you went from a roster size of 40 down to 34. So, man, depth is going to be one of those things, once you get into SEC play, get into the postseason, man, it could just be kind of war of attrition type deal. Your depth is really going to be tested more than it has been the last few years. And that's not just for Texas, that's for everybody.
Yeah. And, I hate to sound like a broken record, but we don't really know outfield yet either. I mean, but once again, a lot of pieces to play with, fellas. Pack obviously did pretty well in the alumni game last week, and he looks to be a factor going into this one. Of course, you got Aiden Robbins, Jonah Williams. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to play with once again.
One spot, right? Aiden Robbins, he's going to get one of those three outfield spots, and then the others we'll have to wait and see. Again, when we last left Dish, we were waiting to see where Jonah would fall into the outfield conversation, how quickly he would be able to get back up to speed to seeing 90, 95 plus, right? So that was maybe the unknown at the time. How close will he be to that, when it comes to opening day? It's going to have to be a wait and see. But altogether, for me, to hear Anthony Pack's name as often as a freshman at Texas, it's not an easy thing to do. So he's turning heads. That's a guy that I'm looking at saying, okay, well, if we're hearing his name as often as we can, that is a guy that we're going to see a lot of this year. Now it's about figuring out who else are going to be in that or is in that conversation. Larson obviously will be a guy, but beyond that, I think for me, it's going to be kind of a wait and see to look at where Jonah falls into the conversation.
There's gonna be, and we see this every year, man, with baseball. It's been Schuessler, it's been Murphy Stelly, it's been Jake McKenzie over the years. There's always going to be one guy that we don't expect to be a big time contributor that ends up starting a bunch of games and being the reason why you win a conference championship or get a top 8 or get to Omaha or whatever. So I'm looking down the list, man. Is it Timo Becerra? Is it Gumbo Duplantier? Who's going to be that guy that we're not really talking about right now that's going to make a really big difference? Because guys, there's going to be some guy on this roster that in theory comes out of nowhere and ends up being a really big part of this thing.
Yeah, without a doubt. All right, I asked y'all this last year, or some variant of this last year, when we did our very first bases loaded of the 2025 season. But let's do some early picks here. So who's your unsung hero, preseason unsung hero of this team when it's all said and done?
Ooh, that is a fun question. Unsung hero, do I dare go Anthony Pack? Just a guy that is going to be able, you read the scouting reports, you go back to what he was able to do in high school, got on base, made extra bases out of seemingly nothing. If he's in the lineup consistently, that's something that I look at and say, okay, maybe Texas does get more aggressive knowing this is what they hope to be when it comes to an SEC level team, steal extra bases, get the extra 90 feet. That's something that I look at and say, if he's in the lineup every day, where does he come from? Because Aiden Robbins, Carson Tenney, we saw a lot of Ethan Mendoza and some positives from guys like Jonah as well, Borba. Those guys are solidified. Who's the next guy that's trying to become a made man? If it's Pack, I think that's a huge plus.
I'm going to go to the pitching staff, and I just love a guy like Max Grubs that's logged a ton of innings in this program, and he doesn't have the best stuff. He doesn't have the best professional profile or whatever. But like we talked about, that guy he understands, and you need guys like this to be contend for a conference championship and a top 8 in a spot in Omaha. You need guys that understand what their role is, are content with their role, and just fulfill their role really, really well. And I think Max Grubs is one of those guys coming out of the bullpen. Whatever the role is, you need him to spot start. You need him to, stretch some innings. You need him to get the last 3 outs of a game. There's a lot of stuff he can do. And again, he's not going to do it with the best stuff. He's not going to be the most intimidating guy. Kind of reminds me of, like Texas had guys like, Nathan Thornhill back in the day. Like the stuff just, it kind of is what it is. But, man, it's more so just heart and mentality and just understanding his role that allows him to be successful. So Max Grubs is probably a guy that he's not going to blow anybody away, but you'll look up at the end of the year. And if this thing ends up getting to Omaha, you'll be like, yeah, Grubs quietly had a really good year.
My next one for y'all, who's Mr. Clutch, whether that's on the mound, at the plate, whatever it may be, who's the guy you can lean on the most when it's all said and done?
This is a big question for me when it comes to the lineup, because you look back a year ago, Texas didn't have, obviously the highest scoring output, offensively, right? There was a lot of timely hits, a lot of clutch factors where you can talk about how impactful a lot of the big hits from Jalen Flores were, right? Rylan Galvan, a number of big time extra base hits that helped save games or put Texas just over the top late in innings. Of course, I think Will Gasparino even had 6 or 7 home runs in one series alone where Texas couldn't get anything else going. So who's going to be that guy? Hopefully it's a guy like a Robbins, guy like a Tenney, someone in the heart of your lineup where a Mendoza or a Pack or someone ahead of him will be on base. I think it has to be an Aiden Robbins. It has to be a guy that when it comes to being the big stick in a lineup, he delivers. So that's where I look at and say he's got to step up and be that guy. And Jeff, you mentioned it. It's not always easy coming in as a transfer, but when you hit 422 at any level of baseball, the expectation is that, hey, you can hit just about anything that's thrown at you.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to the 2 guys I mentioned. I watched Mike Antico struggle early. I watched Skylar Messenger struggle early. Those guys ended up having really, really good years. They were at Texas. For everything you just laid out, CJ, I think it's got to be Ethan Mendoza. Like, you're the guy, you're a returning guy, you're an upperclassman now. Like, you're in the leadership role, you're hitting at the top of the lineup. And he had quite a few of those moments last year too, where he was that guy. So if I'm looking at a guy that, hey, in a tight game where I've got runners on base and I need somebody to drive in a run, Ethan Mendoza, to me, it's probably not gonna be with the long ball, but he's a guy that's going to find a way to get on base, to keep your inning going, to drive in runs. I just like him as a guy that I trust him at the plate in those clutch situations.
I like that.
And then let's do newcomer of the year. It could be a transfer. It could be a freshman who makes their mark their first season.
Believe it or not, I'm going to the hill now. Again, I go back to Crossland, just how often we've heard about him. He looked good in the alumni game. You don't hear praise that often for, young arms when it comes to the staff. And of course, some of the guys that we talked to when it came to who's looking tough at the plate as well. He's a guy that I've had circled for a little bit. I think he's going to have a big impact out of the bullpen, and we'll see if he even gets a look early on or towards the end of the season when it comes to a Tuesday or midweek game.
Aiden Robbins. I just think he's too good a hitter. You look last year at Seton Hall, hit 422, 63 runs, 86 hits, 19 doubles. Total bases 133, 44 walks, 537 OBP, 652 slugging, 20 steals. I don't know how it might take him a week or two to get it figured out, but I don't care what major conference you're playing in. You hit over 400 in a major conference, you probably can do it in the SEC. Maybe not expecting him to hit 400, but he'll be a reliable bat. And it'll be that portal pickup will be every bit as good as we thought it was.
And we ended on this question last year, I believe. So we'll end on the same question this year. This season is a success if.
This is always the tricky one, right? Because expectations were set so high a year ago. I think we said, you make it to a super or you host a regional, that would be a success. It's kind of where we all kind of fell. Well, you go out and you win the regular season title in the SEC, you exceed those expectations, right? And we know the back end of the year kind of fell short. Injuries caught up to him. Obviously, not having Max Ballou is something that I think, hampers a team anyway. So, to me, coming into the season as a consensus, more or less, top 5 team in the country, the expectation is Omaha. That is a successful season. How the chips lie or fall after that, you're playing the 7 or 8 best teams in the entire country once you get there. But coming into the season, the expectation is Omaha. That would be a successful season to me, and that's a great step in year 2, of course, knowing that plenty of other high-end talents are coming to Austin with Schloss and his staff getting more active out there as well.
I may be selling this team short, but I said last year, hey, if you host a regional, you had a good year. I'll just take it a step further. CJ, I don't disagree with you at all that Omaha's it's a reasonable expectation for this team. But if you're playing in the super regional and the best 2 out of 3 with a chance to get to Omaha, I think if you're in that scenario, you had a good year.
There you go. And it's hard to argue with that.
Yep.
I'm going to be with you though, CJ. It's Omaha or bust. Just with the depth on the mound, with the depth, just pretty much everywhere. I don't know. I really have some high again, if they stay healthy, I have high expectations for this team.
Yeah, that's the key, of course. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to ask both of you guys because we talked about, to me, like Ethan Mendoza and Aiden Robbins are guys, and we talked about the pitching staff, but offensively and defensively, like Mendoza and Robbins, to me, those are guys that set your floor pretty high. But who's the guy for you that raises the ceiling? Like, to me, if Adrian Rodriguez is playing at like an all SEC type level, then that's, to me, significantly raises your ceiling. So I don't know who the ceiling raisers are for you guys, but like Rodriguez is one that, like, man, if he's like a first or second team all SEC type guy, then that probably means you're in the mix for a top 8 and contending for a spot in Omaha.
I guess a guy like that for me would be Jonah. Right. And we didn't see him necessarily slug the highest. He's basically just get on base, but we saw what kind of intensity he brought to each at bat. Some fans didn't like that if they weren't wearing burnt orange, of course. Right. But you see what that can do and how that can ignite a lineup. If he is a guy that we consistently see penciled into the starting lineup, he's going to bring that each day. So to me, he is a ceiling raiser just being on the field. So hopefully, and fingers crossed, he's a guy that, injuries don't bite throughout the year, because he's a guy, again, that I think brings fire and intensity just by being out on the field.
Yeah. I think both of those are great answers, and I would even add Tenney to the mix there. You know, I mean, with the way that he should be hitting, the way he is behind the plate as well. I don't know. There's a few of them. I just think they need to, once again, number one, stay healthy, and then carve out the role as the season progresses. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be fun, guys. So a week from today, the season will begin, and we'll have a whole lot more to talk about. Texas will have a scrimmage this weekend. I think from what I understand, that should kind of lay out the floor plan, I guess we could say, of how the first of the season will go, as far as who they're planning on starting, on where, because all that stuff is still up in the air, it sounds like. So we'll see what happens. It'll be fun, no doubt about it. Should be a fun and exciting season ahead. Not as many unknowns as last season, so little expectations a little bit higher, no doubt about it.
Yep.
Well, we will be back same time, same place next week. Thank you for joining us. And for CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you then.
Welcome.
Welcome.